Section 23 of Highways and Hiding by George O. Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 23. 3 times during the night I tried to flip around and cut my way through their cordon, and each time I faced interception. It was evident that we were being driven, and so long as we went to their satisfaction, they weren't going to clobber us. Nurse Farrow woke up along about dawn, stretched, and remarked that she could use a toothbrush and a tub of hot water, and amusedly berated herself for not filling the back seat before we took off. Then she became serious again and asked for the details of the night, which I slipped her as fast as I could. We stopped long enough to swap seats, and I stretched out, but I couldn't sleep. Finally I said, "Stop at the next dog wagon, Farrow. We're going to eat, comes anything." "Won't that be dangerous?" "Shucks," I grunted angrily. "They'll probably thank us. They're probably hungry, too." "We'll find out." The smell of a roadside diner is usually a bit on the thick and greasy side, but I was so hungry that morning that it smelled like Mother's kitchen. We went in, ordered coffee and orange juice, and then disappeared into the restrooms long enough to clean up. That felt so good we ordered the works, and watched the guy behind the fry plate handle the bacon, eggs, and home fries with a deft, efficient manner. We pitched in fast, hoping to beat the flies to our breakfast. We were so intent that we paid no attention to the car that came into the lot until a man came in, ordered coffee and a roll, and then carried it over to our table. "Fine day for a ride, isn't it?" I eyed him. Farrow bristled and got very tense. I said, "I doubt that I know you, friend." "Quite likely, but I know you, Cornell." I took a fast dig. There was no sign of anything lethal except the usual collection of tire irons, screwdrivers, and other tools which, oddly enough, seldom come through as being dangerous because they're not weapons by design. "I'm not healed, Cornell. I'm just here to save us all some trouble." "Telepath?" He nodded imperceptibly. Then he said, "We'll all save time, gasoline, and maybe getting into grief at the cops if you take Route 40 out of St. Louis." "Suppose I don't like US 40? "Get used to it," he said with a crooked smile, "because you'll take US 40 out of St. Louis whether you like it or not." I returned his crooked smile. I also dug his hide, and he was a Mekstrom, of course. "Friend," I replied, "nothing would convince me, after what you've said, that US 40 is anything but a cow path, slippery when wet and impassable in the early spring, late summer, and the third Thursday after Michaelmas." He stood up. "Cornell, I can see your point. You don't like US 40. So I'll help you, good people. If you don't want to drive along such a lousy slab of concrete, just say the word and we'll arrange for you to take it in style, luxury, and without a trace of pain or strain. I'll be seeing you, and a very pleasant trip to you, Miss Farrow." Then the character got up, went to the cashier, and paid for our breakfast as well as his own. He took off in his car, and I have never seen him since. Farrow looked at me, her face white and her whole attitude one of fright. "US 40, she said in a shaky voice, "runs like a stretched string from St. Louis to Indianapolis." She didn't have to tell me any more. About 60 miles north of Indianapolis on Indiana State Highway 37 lies the thriving metropolis of Marion, Indiana, the most important facet of which, to Farrow and me, is an establishment called the Medical Research Center. Nothing was going to make me drive out of St. Louis along US 40. Period. End of message. No answer required. Nothing, because I was very well aware of their need to collect me alive and kicking. If I could not roar out of St. Louis in the direction I selected, I was going to turn my car end for end and have at them. Not in any mild manner, but with deadly intent to do deadly damage. If I'd make a mild pass, They'd undoubtedly corral me by main force and carry me off kicking and screaming. But if I went at them to kill or get killed, they'd have to move aside just to prevent me from killing myself. I didn't think I'd get to the last final blow of that self-destruction. I'd win through. So we left the diner after breakfast on our enemy's expense account and took off again. I was counting on St. Louis. The center of the old city is one big shapeless blob of a dead area, so nice and cold that St. Louis has reversed the usual city-type blight area growth. Ever since Rhine, the slum sections have been moving out and the new buildings have been moving in. So, with the dead area and the brand new wide streets and fancy traffic control, St. Louis was the place to go in along one road, get lost in traffic and come out, roaring along any road desirable. I could not believe that any outfit, hoping to work undercover, could collect enough manpower and cars to block every road, lane, highway, and duck runway that led out of a city as big as St. Louis. Again they hazed us by pacing along parallel roads and behind us, with the open end of their crescent aimed along US 67. We went like hell. Without slowing a bit, we sort of swooped up to St. Louis and took a fast dive into that big blob-shaped dead area. We wound up in traffic and tied Boy Scout knots in our course. I was concerned about overhead coverage from a copter, even though I've been told that the St. Louis dead area extends upward in some places as high as 13,000 feet. The only thing missing was some device or doodad that would let us use our perception or telepathy in this deadness while they couldn't. As it was, we were as psi-blind as they were, so we had to go along the streets with our eyes carefully peeled for cars of questionable ownership. We saw some passenger cars with out-of-state licenses and gave them wide clearances. One of them hung on our tail until I committed a very neat coup by running through a stoplight and sandwiching my car between two whopping big 14-wheel moving vans. I'd have enjoyed the expression on the driver's face if I could have seen it, but then we were gone and he was probably cussing. I stayed between the vans as we wound ourselves along the road and turned into a side street. I stayed between them too long, because the guy in front slammed on his air brakes and the big van came to a stop with a howl of tires on concrete. The guy behind did not even slow down. He closed in on us like an avalanche. I took a fast look around and fought the wheel of my car to turn aside, but he wailed into my tail and we went sliding forward. I was riding my brakes, but the mass of that moving van was so great that my tires just wore flats on the pavement side. We were bearing down on that stopped van, and it looked as though we were going to be driving a very tall car with a very short wheelbase in a very short time. Then the whole back panel of the front van came tumbling towards me from the top, pivoting on a hinge at the bottom, making a fine ramp. The van behind me nudged us up the ramp, and we hurtled forward against a thick, resilient pad that stopped my car without any damage either to the car or to the inhabitants. Then the back panel closed up, and the van took off. Two big birds on each side opened the doors of our car simultaneously and said, "Out." The tall guy on my side gave me a cocksure smile, and the short guy said, "We're about to leave St. Louis on US 40, Cornell. I hope you won't find this journey too rough." I started to take a swing, but the tall one caught my elbow and threw me off balance. The short one reached down and picked up a baseball bat. "Use this, Cornell," he told me. "Then no one will get hurt." I looked at the pair of them, and then gave up. There are odd characters in this world who actually enjoy physical combat and don't mind getting hurt if they can hurt the other guy more. These were the type. Taking that baseball bat and busting it over the head of either one would be the same sort of act as kids use when they square off in an alley and exchange light blows which they call a cardie, just to make the fight legal. All it would get me was a sore jaw and a few cracked ribs. So, after my determination to take after them with murderous intent, they'd pulled my teeth by scooping me up in this van and disarming me. I relaxed. The short one nodded, although he looked disappointed that I hadn't allowed him the fun of a shindy. "You'll find US 40 less rough than you expected," he said. "After all, it's like life, only rough if you make it rough." "Go to hell and stay there," I snapped. That was about as weak a rejoinder as I've ever emitted, but it was all I could get out. The tall one said, "Take it easy, Cornell. You can't win 'em all." I looked across the nose of our trapped car to Farrow. She was leaning against the hood, facing her pair. They were just standing there at ease. One of them was offering a cigarette, and the other held a lighter ready. "Relax," said the one with the smokes. The other one said, "Might as well, Miss Farrow. Fighting won't get nobody nowhere but where you're going anyway. Might as well go on your own feet." Scornfully, Farrow shrugged. "Why should I smoke my own?" she asked nobody in particular. Mentally, I agreed. "Take 'em for all they're worth, Farrow." And then I reached for one, too. Along the side of the van were benches. I sat down, stretched out my back, and let the smoke trickle up. I finished my cigarette and then found that the excitement of this chase, having died so abruptly, left me with only a desire to catch up on sleep. I dozed off, thinking that it wasn't everybody who started off to go to Homestead, Texas, and ended up in Marion, Indiana. Scholar Phelps did not have the green carpet out for our arrival, but he was present when our mobile prison cell opened deep inside of the medical center grounds. So was Thorndyke. Thorndyke and 3 nurses of Amazon build escorted Farrow off with the air of captors collecting a traitor. Phelps smiled superciliously at me and said, "Well, young sir, you've given us quite a chase." "Give me another chance and we'll have another chase," I told him grumpily. "Well, not if we can help it," he boomed cheerfully. "We've big plans for you." "Have I got a vote?" "It's nay if I do." "You're too precipitous," he told me. "It is always an error, Mr. Cornell, to be opinionated. Have an open mind." "To what?" "To everything," he said with an expansive gesture. "The error of all thinking these days is that people do not think. They merely follow someone else's thinking." "And I'm to follow yours?" "I'd prefer that, of course. It would indicate that you were possessed of a mind of your own, that you weren't merely taking a lazy man's attitude and following in the footsteps of your father." "Skip it," I snapped. "Your way isn't—" "No," he warned, with a wave of a forefinger like a prohibitionist warning someone not to touch that quart. "One must never form an opinion on such short notice. Remember, all ideas are not to be rejected just because they do not happen to agree with your own preconceived notions." "Look, Phelps," I snapped, deliberately omitting his title, which I knew would bite a little. "I don't like your personal politics, and I deplore your methods. You can't go on playing this way." "Young man, you err," he said quietly. He did not even look nettled that I'd addressed him in impolite, if not rough, terms. "May I point out that I am far ahead of your game? Thoroughly outnumbered and in ignorance of the counter-movement against me until you so vigorously brought it to my attention, within a year I have fought the counter-movement to a standstill, caused the disbursement of their main forces, ruined their far-flung lines of communication, and have so consolidated my position that I have now made open capture of the main roving factor. The latter is you, young man. A very disturbing influence, and so very necessary to the conduct of this private war. You prate of my attitude, Mr. Cornell. You claim that such an attitude must be defeated. Yet, as you stand there mouthing platitudes, we are preparing to make a frontal assault upon their main base at Homestead. We've waged our war of attrition. A mere spearhead will break them and scatter them to the far winds." "Nice lecture," I grunted. "Who are your writers?" "Let's not attempt sarcasm," he said crisply. "It sits ill upon you, Mr. Cornell." "I'd like to sit on you," I snapped. "Your humor is less tolerable than your sarcasm." "Can it?" I snapped. "So you've collected me. I'm still—" "You'll do very little, Mr. Cornell," he told me. "Your determination to attack us tooth and nail was an excellent program, and with another type of person it might have worked. But I happen to know that your will to live is very great, young man, and that in the final blow you'd not have the will to die great enough to carry your assault to its completion. Know a lot, don't you?" "Yes, indeed I do. So now, if you're through trying to fence at words, we'll go to your quarters." "Lead on," I said in a hollow voice. With an air of stage-type politeness, he indicated a door. He showed me out and followed me. He steered me to a big limousine with a chauffeur and offered me cigarettes from a box on the armrest as the driver started the turbine. The car purred with that muted sound of well-leashed power. "You could be of inestimable value to us," he said in a conversational tone. "I am talking this way to you because you can be of much more value as a willing ally than you would be if unwilling." "No doubt," I replied dryly. "I suggest you set aside your preconceived notions and employ a modicum of practical logic," suggested Scholar Phelps. "Observe your position from a slightly different reign of vantage. Be convinced that no matter what you do or say, we intend to make use of you to the best of our ability. You are not entertaining any doubts of that fact, I'm sure." I shrugged. Phelps was not asking me these things. The Inquisitor was actually telling me. He went right on telling me. "Since you will be used no matter what, you might consider the advisability of being sensible, Mr. Cornell. In blunt words, we are prepared to meet cooperation with certain benefits which will not be proffered otherwise." "In blunter words, you are offering to hire me." Scholar Phelps smiled in a superior manner. "Not that blunt, Mr. Cornell, and not that crude. The term hire implies the performance of certain tasks in return for stipulated remuneration. No, my intention is to give you a position in this organization, the exact terms of which are not clearly definable. Look, young man, I've indicated that your willing cooperation is more valuable to us than otherwise. Join us, and you will enjoy the freedom of our most valued and trusted members. You will take part in upper-level planning. You will enjoy the income and advantages of top executive personnel." He stopped short and eyed me with a peculiar expression. "Mr. Cornell, you have the most disconcerting way. You've actually caused me to talk as if this organization were some sort of big business instead of a cultural unit." I eyed him with the first bit of humor I'd found in many days. "You seem to talk just as though a cultural unit were set above, beyond, and spiritually divorced from anything so sordid as money, position, and the human equivalent of the barnyard pecking order," I told him. "So now let's stop goofing off and put it into simple terms. You want me to join you willingly, to do your job for you, to advance your program, in return for which I shall be permitted to ride in the solid gold Cadillac, quaff rare champagne, and select my own office furniture. Is that about it?" Scholar Phelps smiled, using a benign expression that indicated that he was pleased with himself, but which had absolutely nothing to do with his attitude towards me or any of the rest of the human race. "Mr. Cornell, I am well aware of the time it may take for a man to effect a change in his attitude. In fact, I would be very suspicious if you were to make an abrupt reversal. However, I have outlined my position to you, and you may have time to think it over. Consider, at the very least, the fact that while cooperation will bring you pleasure and non-cooperation will bring you pain, the ultimate result will be that we will make use of your ability in either case. Now, I will say no more for the present." The limousine had stopped in front of a 4-story brick building that was only slightly different in general architecture than the others in the medical center. I could sense some slight difference, but when I took a dig at the interior, I found to my amazement that this building had been built deliberately in a dead zone. The dead area stood up in the clarity like a little blob of black ink at the bottom of a crystal-clear swimming pool, seen just before the ink began to diffuse. Scholar Phelps saw my look of puzzlement and said suavely, "We've reversed the usual method of keeping unwilling guests. Here we know their frame of mind and attitude. Therefore, to build the place in a dead area keeps them from plotting among themselves. I trust that your residence herein will be only temporary, Mr. Cornell." I nodded glumly. I was facing those last and final words, "or else." Phelps signed a register at the guard station in the lobby. We took a very fast and efficient elevator to the 3rd floor, and Phelps escorted me along a hallway that was lined with doors, dormitory style. In the eye-level center of each door was a bullseye that looked like one-way glass, and undoubtedly was. I itched to take a look, but Phelps was not having any. He stopped my single step with a hand on my arm. "This way," he said smoothly. I went this way and was finally shown into one of the rooms. My nice, clean cell away from home. End of chapter 23.